Hi everyone, I just want to talk about Perth property market in 2022 for a second, okay? There's lots of conjecture. Is Perth ever worth investing in? If it is worth investing in, is 2022 the best time to start investing in Perth? In this video, we'll be going through some data points, through some facts where you can make your own mind up whether this is the absolute best time and you'll regret not investing in Perth in 2 or 3 years' time, or whether you should just leave it alone. So my name's PK and I help people build passive income through property investing using data without needing a $15,000 buyer's agent every single time. And before I get to this chart, look, I just want to say, let's just go through some facts. I'm reading off my notes here for a second. So some people think that the entire property market goes up at the same time across Australia and the whole property market comes down, and that there are some good times to invest in property, some bad times to invest in property. The reality is there are hundreds of different markets. Even within Perth, there are hundreds of different markets. And it is always a good time to buy property so long as you know where to invest. There's always areas going up, areas going sideways, areas not doing so well. So that's the first thing, let's just clear out all this mainstream commentary of boom bust. It is always a good time so long as you know where. Let's go through some data. So Perth, within 25 kilometers, has almost nothing for sale. There's a chronic lack of stock on market. Stock on market means properties listed for sale. And the thing is that the vacancy rate is at a 40-year low. And the other thing that I wrote down now is despite WA's closed borders as of the time of recording and, the previous 6 months basically, despite that, despite zero immigration, very little FIFO, transaction levels, weekly transaction levels at a record high. What does that tell us? That tells us that despite people not being able to enter and exit WA, the Perth property market is selling and buying at record levels. That shows interest, okay? That shows sentiment. So important. The second thing I want to say is that Perth property prices are about half of that of Sydney, whereas basically Perth people's incomes are very similar to Sydney. So you draw your own conclusions there. The third thing is that the affordability index for WA is about half that of New South Wales. Once again, regardless of Sydney or regional New South Wales, Perth and regional WA is 2 times more affordable as New South Wales. Most of the country's population that lives in capital cities lives in Sydney. Where should you be investing? Follow the affordability. Okay, third thing or fourth thing is that there's about 160 suburbs in Perth that haven't actually reached the highs of 2014. Okay, so it's still incredibly good timing if you want to buy in Perth. You're not buying at the top like you are in Sydney, like you are perhaps in Melbourne, like you are in so many other places on the East Coast. Now, I'm not pro-Perth or anti-Perth or pro-Sydney or anti-Sydney. I'm just presenting some, you could say, objective facts. You can't really argue with these. And the last thing, or the second to last thing before we go to this chart is that, people are saying interest rates rise, there's going to be a property correction. Now, I've made many videos before where I've explained how historically that conclusion is not correct and is unlikely to be correct. But once again, you can't compare what interest rate rise of 1 or 2% will do to Sydney prices than that of, let's say, a place like Perth, because the affordability story is completely different. Even if interest rates rose by 3%, 4%, there's really no need for Perth investors, Perth residents to sell their properties. It is so much more affordable than Sydney. And the debt to income ratio, we all know about borrowing capacity. We all know that debt to income ratio, your level of debt as a proportion of your income, that is something that most banks look at scrutinizingly when deciding whether to loan you money or not. In Perth, that debt to income ratio is about 5.5 to 1. Okay, in Sydney, it's about 13 to 1, if not more. So once again, to maximize your borrowing capacity or to get the most juice out of your financial circumstances, it makes a ton of sense to consider Perth. Now, this chart that you're looking at, and by the way, hit subscribe, hit the like button, give it a thumbs up, share it, turn notification bell on. We're going into some pretty interesting data. What this is saying is Perth residential vacancy and median rents. Okay, so on the right-hand side, vacancy rates. This is the orange line. Okay, and on the left axis, median rents. Okay, you can see this black line is for median 3-bedroom houses, and then the turquoise or teal line is for units. Let's concentrate on the orange line and the black line. So the orange line, it is effectively at a record low. Okay, the high was in about 2016-17, right, when it was just Perth property market was just terrible. And I don't blame you for being fearful of investing there. And the market effectively prices started dropping in 2014, late 14, I think when it was. And you can see that, you can see vacancy rates were rising at that point. So it doesn't take Einstein to figure out what was going in that property market. There was so many properties vacant. Everyone was rushing away, too many investors for not enough tenants. Same with the owner-occupier market. But you can see what's going on now. I mean, even in the midst of the Perth property boom, in 2011, 2012, vacancy rates were still like 2% on average, which is a pretty balanced market. Now they're less than 1% and actually trending lower if you update this with the most recent data. So, I mean, what that tells me is there's so much pressure in the rental market, and that pressure leads to rent increases. Okay, and you can see that rents for actually both units and houses are up about 20%. You can see from about 330, 340 back in, you could say, 2018, up to about 400. If not a little bit more if the data was more recent. So rents have gone up at least 50, and I know in the suburbs that we're looking at, we're investing in about 10 or 15 suburbs. They've increased by literally $100 per week, literally in the last 6 months. So what is this telling us? This is telling us that all the data points that I explained before, affordability, debt to income ratio, all of these things that are going for Perth, stock on market, it's translating itself into really low vacancy rates, into rent rises. And we know that while it's not a perfect predictor, that as vacancy rates start to diminish and consistently go down, and accompanying that, rents start to increase. They don't always accompany vacancy rate reductions. Vacancy rates sometimes reduce and rents don't really go up. Okay, we want to see both vacancy rates going down and material sustainable rent rises. What that tells us is that the market is really likely to see some price growth. Okay, more investors are going to come in, but more importantly, in my mind, owner-occupiers. Okay, owner-occupiers, that demand for housing will go up. I mean, there's so many causes for that. One just kind of trivial cause is that people think, oh, rents are rising so much. In my household budget, it just no longer makes sense for me to rent. If I can, beg, borrow, and steal, I'm going to buy a house. And if there's enough of those types of people, that starts to cause that rent increase to translate into capital growth, real price increase of the property market. So, look, guys, those are the data facts that I wanted to share with you. Draw your own conclusions. I've done another video on why Perth will boom in 2022, in 2023. But of course, it's always prudent to select the best suburbs, because already in Perth, there are suburbs that in the last 12 months in 2021 have increased by about $100,000 off a base of 350, 400. And there are also suburbs off a base of 350, 400 that have been pretty flat, right? So it all comes down to suburb selection, but this episode was really to give you a holistic understanding of what's driving the Perth property market, some data points, and how it differs from the East Coast. And you can't just, brandish negative or positive commentary on the entire property market nationally without understanding these nuances of individual markets. It's always a good time to buy property as long as you know where. Guys, step up your learning. My podcast link below. Join the Facebook group, more than 10,000 people there. Really learn. The 6 inches between your 2 ears are really the most important thing if you want to get ahead financially. And yeah, I just really encourage that a lot. I've done more than 250 videos here on YouTube. Please learn. Please get ahead for you and your family. And I wish you all the very best. Catch you later. Bye.